The crystal beings of had lived in peace for thousands of years. Their world was green and beautiful, with vast farms that fed many other planets in their star system. They looked like walking diamonds, tall and thin, speaking to each other through musical sounds that rang like bells. Everything changed when the dark ships arrived. Elder N was tending to his crystal garden when the sky turned black. Massive ships, twisted and wrong, blotted out the sun. They looked like they were made of metal and flesh mixed together. From these ships came the void screamers. The creatures poured onto the planet like a disease. They ate everything. Plants, soil, even rocks disappeared into their hungry mouths. Where they walked, the ground turned black and dead. The beautiful farms became wastelands in hours. N ran as fast as his crystal legs could carry him. Behind him, he heard the terrible sound the creatures made. It was not like any noise he had ever heard. It hurt his mind and made his thoughts scatter like leaves in the wind. "Everyone to the underground cities," he called to his people. His voice rang out in clear, musical tones that carried far across the land. "Seal the tunnels. Send the distress signal." They had built their cities deep underground long ago, back when they first learned to dig. The tunnels were works of art, carved from living crystal that grew and changed with time. They had thought these cities would protect them from anything. They were wrong. From his command post deep below ground, N watched the surface through crystal screens. The void screamers were building something up there. Strange towers grew from the dead earth like horrible trees. The towers pulsed with dark energy that made the crystal screens flicker and crack. "The signal has been sent," reported Communications Elder. Her musical voice shook with fear. "The Galactic Council should receive it soon." N tried to stay calm. The Galactic Council was strong. They had ships and weapons. They would come and drive away these monsters. But hours passed, and the creatures kept digging. The sound of their work echoed through the crystal tunnels like thunder. Every minute, they came closer to the underground cities. Finally, ships appeared in the sky. N felt hope rise in his crystalline chest. The council had come. Sleek silver ships dropped from space, firing bright energy beams at the void screamers. The battle cruisers looked powerful and dangerous. The science vessels used weapons that bent light itself. For a moment, it looked like they might win. Then the void screamers fought back. The twisted creatures on the surface let out a sound that was not really sound at all. It reached into the minds of the council's soldiers and twisted their thoughts. Warriors, known for their iron discipline, began firing at their own ships. Pilots, whose minds were like perfect computers, crashed into each other as their thoughts became scrambled. Admiral O of the tried to rally his forces. His deep, growling voice came through the radio waves. "Pull back. All ships pull back. This is not a retreat, this is a tactical withdrawal." But N knew the truth. The council fleet was running away. The void screamers were too strong, too alien. Their mind attacks worked on every known species in the galaxy. Every known species except one. "Wait," said Admiral O, his voice crackling through space. "There is one option left, the humans." The other council leaders argued. The humans were new to space. They came from a world so dangerous that most aliens thought it was impossible to live there. Their planet had storms that could flatten cities, animals that could kill with poison or claws, and disasters that happened without warning. Most aliens thought humans were barely civilized savages. "They will not come," said the fleet commander through her translation device. "They have no reason to risk their lives for us." Admiral O made a sound that might have been laughter. "You do not know humans very well. When someone calls for help, they come. It is what they do." He sent the distress signal on all frequencies, including the crude radio waves that humans used. He told them about the crystal people trapped underground. He told them about the monsters that ate worlds. He told them that no one else could help. Far away in space, Captain was drinking coffee on the bridge of her ship when the signal came through. The human exploration vessel Indomitable was mapping new star systems, far from any civilized worlds. Was small and dark-haired, with scars on her hands from years of ship repairs. She had grown up on Earth's Australian continent where everything was trying to kill you. Poisonous spiders, deadly snakes, storms that could blow away buildings, and heat that could cook a person alive. It had made her tough. She listened to the alien admiral's message 3 times. Her crew gathered around her. They were all humans, all from the dangerous world called Earth. They had joined the space fleet to explore, to see new things, to help where they could. "So," said her first officer, Lieutenant Commander James Park. He was a big man from Korea who had survived 3 different natural disasters before he was 20. A whole planet of crystal people about to be eaten by space monsters. The fancy alien fleets ran away, and they want us to help. Stood up, she was barely 5 feet tall, but her crew would follow her anywhere. "What do you think, people? Should we go?" The bridge crew looked at each other. Engineer spoke up first. She had grown up in Mexico during the earthquake years. "Those crystal folks didn't do anything wrong. They grow food for other people." "The alien fleets have better ships than us," said Navigator Singh. He was from India, where he had lived through floods, heat waves, and monsoons that could kill. "Better weapons, better armor." "But they don't have us," said. Her crew smiled. They understood. Walked to her captain's chair and sat down. "Change course for the system. Maximum speed." "Captain," said Lieutenant Park, "we don't have permission from Earth Command. This could be considered an act of war." Thought about the crystal people hiding underground while monsters ate their world. She thought about the beautiful farms being destroyed. She thought about the musical voices full of fear. "Then we'd better make sure we win," she said. "Send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them we're going to save some people." The Indomitable turned toward the distant stars and accelerated. Behind them, other human ships were getting the same message. Soon, the entire human fleet would be coming. The crystal people just had to hold on a little longer. Help was coming from the death world called Earth. Admiral Sarah was eating breakfast when the emergency message arrived at Frontier Base Prometheus. The human space station sat at the edge of known space, watching for threats and mapping new worlds. Had built her reputation fighting pirates and rescuing lost ships in the most dangerous parts of the galaxy. She was a tall woman with gray hair and steady hands. She had been born during the great storms on Earth's North American continent, where tornadoes and hurricanes were normal parts of life. Like all humans who lived to adulthood, she had learned to make quick decisions when death was coming fast. The message from Captain came through on the emergency channel. Listened to the recording twice, then called her senior staff to the command center. "People," she said, looking at the dozen officers around the holographic table, "we have a problem. A whole planet of peaceful aliens is about to be wiped out by something called Void Screamers. The Galactic Council's best fleets ran away. One of our exploration ships is heading there alone." Commander Wei, her second in command, pulled up star charts on the display. "The system is 12 hours away at maximum speed. We could get there with the whole fleet." "Without permission," pointed out Captain Davis, the station's security chief. "Earth Command hasn't authorized any military action. We could start a war." Admiral stood up and walked to the big window that looked out into space. She could see her fleet docked to the station. 12 human ships, not as pretty or advanced as the alien vessels, but tough and reliable like the people who built them. "How long will it take Earth Command to debate this?" she asked. "Days, maybe weeks," said Wei. "They'll want to study the situation, talk to the council, check all the legal issues." Thought about the crystal people hiding underground. She thought about Captain flying alone into a system full of monsters. She thought about what it meant to be human. "Too long," she said. "The crystal folks will be dead by then, and will be fighting alone." She turned back to her officers. I'm giving the order to deploy the entire expeditionary fleet. We leave in 1 hour. The room went quiet. Captain Davis cleared his throat. Admiral, that's against direct orders. Earth Command specifically said no unauthorized military actions. Smiled, but it was not a nice smile. Then they should have sent the orders faster. Sometimes you have to do what's right first and ask permission later. Within an hour, the human fleet was moving. 12 ships carrying 3,000 crew members, heading toward a fight they might not win. The ships were built tough, designed to survive in the dangerous systems where humans like to explore. They had thick armor, powerful engines, and weapons that could crack asteroids. But most importantly, they had humans aboard. As the fleet traveled through hyperspace, studied everything they knew about void screamers. The reports from the Council fleet made them sound like nightmare creatures from the worst horror stories. They ate entire worlds, turning them into twisted copies of themselves. Their psychic attacks could drive most aliens insane or turn them against their own people. The good news, said Dr. Martinez, the fleet's alien specialist, is that humans seem to be resistant to psychic attacks. Our brains are too chaotic and emotional. Most aliens think in straight lines. We think in loops and spirals. What's the bad news? Asked. Everything else. These creatures are stronger than anything we've fought. They adapt to new weapons quickly. They never stop attacking until everything is dead. Nodded. She had grown up with creatures that never stopped attacking. Earth was full of them. Sharks in the oceans, tigers in the forests, bacteria that could kill in hours. Humans had learned to fight things that were stronger, faster, and more deadly than they were. We'll manage, she said. Meanwhile, Captain and the Indomitable had reached the outer edge of the system. What she saw there made her stomach turn cold. The system was wrong. Where there should have been a bright yellow star and green planets, she saw darkness. The star was still there, but it looked sick, surrounded by a cloud of black material that absorbed its light. The planets were covered in the same darkness, like infections spreading across their surfaces. My God, whispered Lieutenant Park, what did they do to this place? Engineer was scanning the system with every sensor they had. I'm reading massive biological activity on the main planet. Whatever those things are, they're turning the whole world into some kind of living machine. Navigator Singh found the alien ships. Contacts, Captain. Lots of them. I count at least 50 vessels around the planet. They're not like anything in our databases. Looked at the tactical display. The Void Screamer ships looked like they were grown rather than built. They had organic curves mixed with metal spikes. Some were as big as space stations. They moved in patterns that hurt to look at, like a dance performed by mad insects. Any sign of the Crystal People? She asked. Adjusted her scanners. I'm detecting energy signatures from underground. They're still alive, but barely. Whatever those monsters are doing, it's weakening the planet's crust. Made her decision. Take us in closer. We need to get a better look at what we're dealing with. Captain, said Park, 1 ship against 50. That's suicide. No, said, that's reconnaissance. The fleet will be here soon and they'll need to know what we're facing. The Indomitable moved deeper into the system, staying hidden behind asteroids and debris. Had learned stealth tactics during the Mars colony wars, where human ships had to hide from superior forces until they could strike at the right moment. As they got closer to the main planet, the horror became clear. The surface was covered in writhing, organic structures that pulsed with dark energy. The beautiful farms and forests were gone, replaced by nightmare landscapes of twisted metal and living flesh. They're not just eating the planet, said, her voice shaking. They're changing it into something else, something alive. The Void Screamer ships suddenly changed their patterns. Several of them turned toward the Indomitable's position. They know we're here, said Singh. All ships are converging on our position, reported Park. We've got about 10 minutes before they reach us. Felt the familiar calm that came before a fight. It was the same feeling she had experienced during the Australian cyclone season, when you knew the storm was coming and all you could do was get ready. "Send everything we've recorded back to the fleet," she ordered. "Tell them what we found here. Tell them to come fast." The first Void Screamer ship reached them as they tried to escape. It looked like a giant spider made of metal and flesh, with weapons that fired beams of pure darkness. The beam hit the Indomitable's shields and made them scream like living things in pain. "Return fire," ordered. Their weapons hit the alien ship and tore holes in its hull, but the holes sealed themselves in seconds. The creature ship kept coming, growing new weapons as they watched. "It's adapting to our attacks," said. "Every shot we fire, it gets better at defending against it." Smiled grimly. "Then we'll just have to get creative." She had grown up on a world where everything adapted to kill you. Humans had learned to adapt faster. As more Void Screamer ships closed in, she began planning something that no alien military would ever consider. Something that only humans from a death world would be crazy enough to try. The main fleet was still hours away, but was going to give these monsters a taste of human creativity. She was going to show them why you should never corner something that came from Earth. Admiral's fleet dropped out of hyperspace just as Captain was fighting for her life. The Indomitable was surrounded by 6 Void Screamer ships, its hull cracked and bleeding atmosphere into space. Had been running and fighting for 2 hours, using every trick she knew to stay alive. The sight that met's eyes was worse than the reports had described. The looked like a cancer patient in the final stages of disease. Black veins of organic matter spread across continents like infected blood vessels. The oceans had turned dark red. The atmosphere itself seemed to pulse with evil life. "Jesus Christ," whispered Commander Way. "They're turning the whole planet into a monster." Studied the tactical display. Over 60 Void Screamer ships moved around the planet in patterns that made her head hurt to follow. Some ships looked like giant insects with metal wings. Others resembled sea creatures covered in spikes and guns. All of them radiated wrongness that made human minds recoil. "Sin trouble," reported Communications Officer Park. "Her ship is taking heavy damage." "Not for long," said. "All ships attack pattern Delta. Hit the creatures surrounding the Indomitable. Full power to weapons." The human fleet charged into battle like wolves attacking a herd of sheep. Their ships were smaller and uglier than the alien vessels, but they moved with purpose and coordination that the Void Screamers couldn't understand. The battle was unlike anything in the tactical manuals. Void Screamer weapons fired beams of darkness that seemed to eat light itself. When they hit human ships, the crew reported hearing whispers in their minds, voices that tried to convince them to give up and die. But humans had lived with voices in their heads for millions of years. Fear, doubt, anger, hope. Human minds were already full of conflicting thoughts. The alien mind attacks just got lost in the noise. "Their psychic attacks are not working on us," reported Dr. Martinez from the fleet command ship. "Human brain patterns are too chaotic for them to control." Smiled grimly. "Then let's show them what chaos looks like." The human ships fought like their crews had grown up fighting dirty, desperate, and completely unpredictable. When Void Screamer vessels tried to use their adaptive defenses, human captains switched weapons constantly. Lasers, missiles, kinetic rounds, even mining charges, anything that could hurt the enemy. Captain Torres, commanding the assault carrier Fury, took a different approach. When a Void Screamer ship that looked like a mechanical whale tried to ram him, he rammed it back. The 2 ships crashed together in a tangle of metal and flesh, both severely damaged. "Sir," said his weapons officer, "our main guns are offline." "Then use the backup guns," Torres replied. "Those are offline too." Torres looked at the Void Screamer ship stuck to his hull like a parasite. Through the viewports, he could see alien creatures moving inside the enemy vessel. They were trying to cut through his ship's armor to reach his crew. "Engine room," he called on the intercom. "Give me everything you've got." "Sir, if we overload the engines while attached to that thing, both ships will explode." Tors thought about the crystal people hiding underground while monsters ate their world. "That's the idea. All hands, abandon ship. You have 30 seconds. As escape pods launched from the Fury, Tors stayed on the bridge. He watched his crew get clear, then pushed the engine controls past the red line. Both ships vanished in a ball of nuclear fire that lit up the dark space around the planet. Across the battle, other human crews were making similar sacrifices. The destroyer, relentless, her weapons destroyed and hull breached, used her remaining engines to crash into a Void Screamer command ship. The cruiser Phoenix, surrounded by enemies, detonated her reactor core and took 4 alien vessels with her. But for every Void Screamer ship they destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. The creatures were building new vessels from the planet's biomass, growing them like fruit on a twisted tree. "Admiral," said Wei, "we're losing ships faster than we can replace them. We need a new strategy." Looked at the planet below. Somewhere down there, the crystal people were still alive, still waiting for rescue. She made the hardest decision of her career. "Split the fleet," she ordered. "Half stays here to keep the orbital forces busy. The other half goes down to get those people out." Commander Wei stared at her. "Admiral, that's suicide. The atmospheric teams will have no backup if things go wrong up here." "Things are already going wrong," replied. "But that's what we do best, make the impossible work." The atmospheric assault ships were smaller and faster than the main battle vessels. They were designed to fly through the violent storms and toxic atmospheres of the worlds humans chose to colonize. Their crews came from the toughest places on Earth, the deep ocean research stations, the polar survival camps, the volcanic mining colonies. Commander Tors, nephew of the captain who had just died saving his crew, led the atmospheric assault. His ship, the Hammer, dove toward the planet's surface, followed by 8 other vessels. They carried 300 Marines and all the rescue equipment they could fit. The descent was a nightmare. The planet's atmosphere had been poisoned by Void Screamer activities. Toxic clouds that glowed with sick light reached up toward the human ships like grasping fingers. Lightning crackled between organic towers that rose from the surface like infected bones. "Sir," said his pilot, Lieutenant Santos, "the navigation systems are going crazy. Something down there is messing with our computers." Tors looked at his instruments. Half of them showed impossible readings. The other half showed nothing at all. "Switch to manual control. Fly by sight." "In this soup, sir, I can barely see 50 meters. "Then we'll fly 50 meters at a time," Tors replied. The assault ships dove through layers of poisonous gas and electromagnetic interference that would have killed most alien pilots. But these were humans who had learned to fly through hurricanes, sandstorms, and volcanic ash clouds. They had trained in conditions that other species would consider instantly fatal. As they broke through the lower atmosphere, the true horror of the planet's surface became visible. The Void Screamers had turned the entire world into a living machine. Organic structures pulsed with dark energy. Rivers of black liquid flowed between towers of twisted metal and flesh. The air itself seemed to move and breathe. "Target acquired," reported Lieutenant Santos. "I've got the entrance to the underground cities, but sir, there are hundreds of those creatures between us and the target." Tors looked at the tactical display. Ground-based Void Screamers were already moving toward their landing zone. The creatures looked like a cross between spiders and tanks, with weapons growing from their backs like metal flowers. "Then we go through them," he said. "All ships prepare for emergency landing. We're going to hit the ground hard and fast." As the human ships descended toward the infected surface, explosions bloomed around them. Void Screamer ground defenses fired beams of energy that turned rocks to lava and metal to gas. One assault ship took a direct hit and crashed into a structure, both vanishing in flames. But the remaining ships kept coming. They hit the surface like meteors, their armored hulls screeching across the twisted landscape. Before they had even stopped moving, the cargo doors were opening and Marines were pouring out. The surface of the planet felt wrong under their boots. The ground was soft and warm, like walking on living flesh. The air tasted of metal and decay, even through their environmental suits' filters. Strange sounds echoed from the organic structures around them, sounds like breathing, like heartbeats, like whispers in languages that hurt to hear. "Form up," shouted Sergeant, a combat engineer from Earth's Australian mining colonies. "Stay together and keep moving. These things don't like it when we bunch up." The Marines advanced toward the entrance to the crystal cities, fighting creatures that seemed to pour from the infected ground itself. The void screamers came in dozens of different forms, some like giant insects, others like mechanical snakes, still others that description. But the humans had advantages that the creatures didn't expect. They were used to fighting things that were bigger, stronger, and more dangerous than themselves. They worked as teams, watching each other's backs and sharing resources. Most importantly, they didn't give up even when things looked hopeless. As they reached the entrance to the underground cities, Tors could hear something through the radio static, a sound like crystal bells ringing in harmony. The crystal people were still alive, still singing their songs of hope and fear. "Almost there," he told his troops, "just a little farther." Behind them, the space battle raged on. Admirals' ships were fighting against impossible odds, buying time for the rescue operation with their blood and courage. Some would not survive to see the end of this day. But they were human, and humans never left anyone behind. The entrance to the crystal cities was a work of art that took the human Marines' breath away. Carved pillars of living crystal rose from the ground like frozen music, their surfaces reflecting light in patterns that seemed to sing. But the beauty was marred by dark veins that spread across the crystal like cancer, pulsing with evil energy. Commander Tors led his Marines through the entrance into tunnels that sparkled like the inside of a geode. The walls were smooth and curved, grown rather than cut. Crystals in the ceiling provided soft light that shifted colors as they walked beneath them. "Stay alert," Tors whispered into his radio. "These tunnels are beautiful, but they're also perfect for ambushes." The Marines moved through the crystal passages in tight formation, their boots making soft echoing sounds on the smooth floor. Some of the men and women had grown up in caves and mines on Earth, but they had never seen anything like this. The tunnels seemed alive, responding to their presence with subtle changes in light and sound. They had been walking for 10 minutes when they heard the singing. It started as a faint melody that seemed to come from the crystals themselves. As they moved deeper, the sound grew stronger and more complex. Dozens of voices joined together in harmonies that made the tunnel walls vibrate with sympathetic resonance. "The crystal people," said Lieutenant Santos, "they're still alive." The first group they found was huddled in a side chamber, their diamond-like bodies pressed together for comfort. When they saw the armored humans enter their sanctuary, they sang a note of pure terror that cracked several crystals in the walls. Elder N stepped forward, his crystalline form catching the light like a prism. Through his translation device, his musical voice became words the humans could understand. "You are humans from the Death World." Tors removed his helmet, showing his face and gray hair. "That's right, we're here to get you out." The crystal people sang together in a complex harmony that the translation device struggled to interpret. Finally, N spoke again. "We are grateful, but it is impossible. The surface is death. The tunnels to other cities are blocked. We cannot leave our home." "You can't stay either," said Sergeant, checking her scanner. The device was picking up movement in the lower tunnels. "Those things are digging toward you. They'll be here soon." The song became discordant with fear. N's crystalline form dimmed. "We know. We have felt them coming for days, but where can we go? This is our world. Our ancestors built these cities over thousands of years. Studied her readings more carefully. What she saw made her stomach turn cold. Commander, you need to see this. Tors looked at the scanner display. The entire underground network was mapped out in 3 dimensions, showing the crystal cities connected by beautiful tunnels that spread like a spider web through the planet's crust. But now there were other tunnels, darker ones, cutting through the crystal network like wounds. They're not just digging randomly, said. They're following the crystal structures, using them as guides. And sir, they're not trying to get into the cities. What do you mean? Pointed to the deepest parts of the scan. They're digging past the cities, going deeper. They're turning the whole planet's core into some kind of organic machine. When they're done, the surface will collapse and everything down here will be crushed. The crystal people had been listening through their translation devices. Their harmony became a wail of despair that made the tunnel walls ring like bells. How long? Asked Tors. Ran calculations on her scanner. At their current rate, 6 hours, maybe 7. After that, this whole section of the planet will cave in. Elder N's light flickered like a dying star. Then we will sing our last songs and wait for the end. It is better to die in our beautiful cities than to flee to the emptiness of space. Like hell, said. The fell silent at her harsh words, looked around at the frightened crystal people, then at her fellow Marines. These were humans who had grown up with impossible choices, who had learned to survive when everything was trying to kill them. We're not leaving anyone behind, she said, but we need to move fast and we need to move light. Over the next 3 hours, the human Marines worked like machines. They ran through crystal tunnels that no human foot had ever touched, carrying refugees who were too fragile to move quickly on their own. The crystal people weighed almost nothing, but they were brittle. One fall could shatter them like glass. The cultural differences became obvious immediately. When they needed to make a decision, they would sing together in complex harmonies until they reached consensus. This could take minutes or hours. When humans needed to make a decision, whoever was in charge decided, and everyone else followed orders. We cannot leave the song crystals, sang a group of young. They contain the memories of our people. They're rocks, shouted Private, struggling to carry 3 crystal children while the adults debated. Heavy rocks, we can't carry them and you. Elder N tried to mediate. Please understand, the song crystals are not just objects. They are our history, our culture, our very souls made manifest in crystal form. Sargent made the decision that would haunt her dreams for years to come. Leave them. Save the people. This wail of anguish echoed through the tunnel like the death cry of civilization itself. But they had bigger problems. Scanner showed the void screamer drilling machines getting closer to the main city chambers. The organic tunnels they were carving leaked poison into the air and made the crystal structures unstable. Commander, she said to Tors, we have a situation. The drill worms are about to breach the main ceremonial chamber. When they do, poison gas will flood the entire network. Tors looked at the tactical display. 2,000 crystal people were still in the lower cities, too far away to reach before the breach occurred. Options, he asked. Had grown up in the deep mines of Australia, where cave-ins were a constant threat. She knew structures, knew stress points, knew how things broke and fell. We can collapse Section 7, she said quietly, seal off the lower cities from the poison, but we'll be trapping ourselves down here with limited air, and the people in Section 7 will be cut off from the main evacuation route. They'll have to find another way out or... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Tors looked at the crystal people around him. They were singing softly, a melody that sounded like acceptance and despair. They thought they were all going to die. Do it, he said. Place the charges with the precision of someone who had been working with explosives since she was old enough to hold a detonator. The crystal tunnels were works of art, but they were also structural engineering. She knew where to hit them to make them fall in exactly the right pattern. "Everyone back," she shouted. "Fire in the hole." The explosion shook the entire underground network. Beautiful crystal pillars that had stood for thousands of years cracked and fell. Ancient artworks were buried under tons of rubble. The passage to Section 7 was sealed forever. But the poison gas was stopped. In the sudden silence that followed, the Crystal People sang a song unlike any they had sung before. It was a song of loss and gratitude mixed together, of endings and beginnings. Through her translation device, Sargent heard it as, "Thank you for our lives. We mourn what is lost." "We're not done yet," said Tors. "We still have to get everyone out of here." Above them, the space battle continued. Admiral's fleet was holding the orbital perimeter, but they were taking heavy losses. The rescue ships were ready to evacuate the Crystal People, but first the Marines had to get them to the surface. And between the underground cities and the landing zone, hundreds of Void Screamers were waiting. Checked her weapons and looked around at her fellow Marines. They were tired, scared, and running low on ammunition. The easy part of the mission was over. Now they had to fight their way out of hell while carrying 2,000 refugees, who would shatter if they were dropped too hard. Just another day in the life of humans from the death world called Earth. The journey back to the surface became a running battle through crystal tunnels that were collapsing around them. The Void Screamers had noticed the explosions and were pouring into the underground network from every opening they could find. The creatures moved like liquid metal, flowing through cracks and holes that should have been too small for them. Commander Tors carried Elder N under his arm while directing his Marines through his radio headset. The crystal person weighed almost nothing, but his body was fragile as spun glass. One hard jolt would shatter him into pieces. "Contact front," shouted Private. A group of Void Screamers had appeared in the main tunnel ahead, blocking their escape route. The creatures looked like mechanical spiders with human skulls for heads, their metal legs clicking against the crystal floor. "Take them down," ordered Tors. The Marines opened fire with weapons designed to work in the dangerous environments of human space. Kinetic rifles that could punch through armor, plasma cutters that could melt steel, and explosive rounds that scattered sharp fragments in all directions. The Void Screamers died quickly, but more were coming from behind. The Marines found themselves in the middle of a deadly game, running through beautiful crystal passages while carrying fragile refugees and fighting monsters that seemed to multiply with each one they killed. "Sir," panted Sargent, "we're not going to make it at this rate. There are too many of them, and we're slowing down every time we have to fight." Tors looked back at the long line of Crystal People following them through the tunnels. Each refugee was being carried or guided by a human Marine. The Crystal People tried to help, but their bodies were not built for running or fighting. They were artists and farmers, not warriors. "Options?" he asked. The combat engineer checked her remaining explosives. "I can seal off the rear tunnels, slow them down, but someone needs to stay behind to set the charges at the right time." "I'll do it," said Tors. "Sir, that's suicide. You won't have time to get clear." Tors looked at Elder N, whose diamond-like eyes reflected the lights of the tunnel in patterns like stars. The crystal person was humming softly, a song that meant something like courage in the face of impossible odds. "Maybe," said Tors, "but everyone else gets out, that's what matters." Above them, the space battle had reached a desperate point. Admiral's fleet was down to 8 ships, surrounded by more than 40 Void Screamers. The human vessels were battered and bleeding atmosphere, their crews exhausted from hours of continuous fighting. Captain and the Indomitable were still fighting, but her ship was held together with emergency patches and determination. Half her weapons were offline, her engines were failing, and her hull had been breached in 6 places. "Admiral," she reported over the radio, "we can't hold them much longer. Whatever Tors is doing down there, he needs to do it fast. Looked at her tactical display. The Void Screamer ships were closing in from all directions, their organic weapons charging for what might be the final attack. Her own ships were almost out of ammunition, their crews pushed beyond the limits of human endurance. But humans had always specialized in impossible situations. "All ships," she said into her radio, "prepare for Operation Broken Arrow." Her bridge crew stared at her. Commander Wei was the first to speak. "Admiral, that's a theoretical tactic. It's never been tested." "Nothing about this fight has been tested," replied. "We're making it up as we go along." Operation Broken Arrow was something human military scientists had developed after studying Void Screamer attack patterns. The creatures used a hive mind to coordinate their movements, but that same hive mind could be disrupted if you hit it with enough electromagnetic interference at exactly the right frequency. The problem was that generating that much interference would require overloading a starship's reactor core. The ship doing it would be destroyed in the process. "I'll use the Indomitable," said Captain over the radio. "My ship is already damaged beyond repair." "Negative," replied. "You've got the most experienced crew. We need you for the evacuation. I'll handle this." Command ship, the Defiance, was the largest vessel in the human fleet. Her reactor was powerful enough to generate the electromagnetic pulse they needed, but not powerful enough to survive it. "All hands abandon ship," ordered. "You have 5 minutes to reach the escape pods." Her bridge crew looked at her in shock. "Admiral," said Wei, "you can't stay behind. The fleet needs you." Smiled sadly. "The fleet needs the crystal people to get out safely. Someone has to buy them that time." As her crew reluctantly headed for the escape pods, began the sequence that would turn her ship into a massive electromagnetic bomb. The process was complex and dangerous, requiring her to manually override dozens of safety systems. Below on the planet, Tors was setting his own charges while his Marines continued toward the surface with their precious cargo of refugees. The Void Screamers were getting closer, their inhuman cries echoing through the crystal tunnels like the sounds of nightmares. "Charges set," Tors reported to. "Get everyone clear." "Sir, we can't leave you behind." "That's an order, Sergeant. Get our people out of here." Knew that tone. She had heard it from her grandfather, who had died saving his mining crew from a cave-in. She had heard it from her father, who had died protecting their town from. It was the voice of someone who had accepted their death so that others could live. "Understood, sir," she said quietly. "It's been an honor serving with you." Tors smiled as he watched his Marines disappear around a bend in the tunnel. The crystal people were singing as they went, a harmony that sounded like gratitude and sorrow mixed together. At least some of them would survive to sing again on new worlds. The Void Screamers rounded the corner just as he pressed the detonator. The explosion brought down half a mountain's worth of crystal and stone, sealing the lower tunnels forever. It also sent shock waves through the planet's crust that reached the surface just as Admiral triggered her own sacrifice. The electromagnetic pulse from the Defiance's death spread across space like an invisible wave. For 30 seconds, the Void Screamer hive mind went silent. Their ship stopped moving in coordination and began firing at random targets, including each other. In that chaos, the remaining human ships executed their escape plan. They used their combined engines in a maneuver that no sane spaceship captain would ever attempt. They created artificial gravity waves that destabilized the planet's rotation. The result was catastrophic. Massive earthquakes tore across the planet's surface. The organic structures that the Void Screamers had built began to collapse as the ground shifted beneath them. The network of tunnels that connected their drilling operations started to cave in on itself. Sargent led the last group of refugees out of the underground cities, just as the surface began to crack open around them. The evacuation ships were waiting, their cargo holds open and ready to receive the crystal people. "Move, move, move," she shouted, carrying 3 children while their parents sang songs of terror behind her. The loading process should have taken hours. The humans did it in minutes, throwing safety regulations out the window and cramming refugees into every available space. Some crystal people had to be held in maintenance closets. Others were strapped into cargo containers. As the last evacuation ship lifted off from the dying planet, looked back at the world they were leaving behind. The surface was splitting apart like a broken egg, revealing the twisted organic machinery that the void screamers had built inside the planet's core. "Did we get everyone?" she asked. Lieutenant Santos checked the manifests. "Almost everyone. We lost 200 Marines, including Commander Torres. 3 ships didn't make it off the surface." Closed her eyes. 300 human lives given to save 2,000 crystal people they had never met. On most worlds, that would be called a tragedy. On Earth, they called it Tuesday. 2 weeks later, the Galactic Council convened in emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss what had happened at. The Void Screamers had been destroyed when their converted planet collapsed on itself, but the cost had been enormous. The Crystal People, now refugees scattered across dozens of worlds, had composed a harmony that they broadcast throughout the galaxy. Through translation devices, it came out as, "Those who carry fire through darkness, a song of gratitude for the humans of Earth." Admiral O of the stood before the council assembly, his warrior's pride humbled by what he had witnessed. "We have always known that humans came from a dangerous world," he said. "We thought this made them savage and unpredictable. We were wrong. It made them heroes." The fleet commander, her mathematical mind struggling to process what humans had accomplished, added her own testimony. "They succeeded where our best strategies failed. They saved those who could not save themselves, and they did it because someone called for help." Elder N, his crystalline form still bearing scars from the evacuation, sang for the council. His words resonated through the assembly hall. "We asked for help and they came. We asked for rescue and they gave their lives. We asked for hope and they carried us through darkness to light." The council vote was unanimous. Humanity was granted full membership and given the honorary title of Guardians of the Lost. It was the first time in galactic history that an entire species had been honored for heroism. Sergeant, now promoted to lieutenant and decorated with medals from a dozen different worlds, stood on the observation deck of the new human embassy station. She watched ships from across the galaxy arriving to pay their respects to the humans who had died at. Commander Wei, the highest-ranking human survivor of the battle, joined her at the window. "Any regrets?" he asked. Thought about Commander Torres, about Admiral, about the 300 Marines who had given their lives for people they had never met. She thought about the crystal cities they had been forced to destroy, and the song crystals they had left behind. "No," she said finally. "We did what humans do. We saw people in trouble and we helped." Through the window, they could see Earth in the distance, a blue and white marble that most aliens still considered too dangerous to visit. But now they understood that the same forces that made Earth deadly had also made its people into something unique in the galaxy. Heroes who would cross any distance, fight any enemy, and pay any price to answer a call for help. Even from people they had never met, on worlds they had never seen. Because that was what humans did. They carried fire through darkness, and they never left anyone behind.